Hey everybody, welcome back to the Sonic Chronicle. My name is Owen. You're looking at a grey couch. As a result, you know what that means. It's time for the book. Today we are going to be looking at more guitars, more guitar history, and I suppose taking a look at the visual representation of what a guitar is by specific brands. And today we are going to be looking at Gretsch guitars, because Gretsch are criminally underrated in my opinion. Many years ago, when I first started playing guitar, I was interested in all types of guitar playing. I was interested in metal, I was interested in punk, I was interested in hard rock, I was interested in some classical guitar playing, I was interested in, country, and I was also drawn to Americana, and with that came Rockabilly. No brand is more synonymous with Rockabilly than Gretsch, in my opinion, and that is because largely of the efforts of one Mr. Brian Setzer, who was part of the Stray Cats, maybe still is part of the Stray Cats, and is an excellent guitar player, and really kind of turned me on to those hollow bodies not just being fuddy-duddy guitars, as I may have thought in the past. Anyway, before we get started, please do consider hitting the like button if you like what I do. Please consider subscribing to the channel so that you get made aware of when these videos go live. And of course, leave me comments in the comment section below if there are any guitar brands that you would like me to do a visual history of. I do enjoy these, and the last one that I did on BC Rich, allowed me to do a little bit more of a deep dive into BC Rich's history and look at some cool websites and find some cool resources. With that said, let's get the book open. Okay, here we go. We've gone past all the Fenders, we've gone past all the Gibsons, and here we go. We've got Gretsch guitars. As it says here, making a distinct mark with some visually arresting guitars, Gretsch has attracted some key players in its long history, including the likes of Chet Atkins, Duane Eddy, and George Harrison. So not just the Stray Cats and Rockabilly style music, it was also very popular among early rock music players like the Beatles. Granted, that was largely pop rock at the time, but I think the Gretches are going to be one of those things that we see being largely adopted by popular guitar players over time. So originally Gretsch was a company that made drums and banjos and tambourines and toys. Before, it was Friedrich who had founded the company, Fred Gretsch Manufacturing, and it was his son, also named Fred, who went on to found the company as a guitar builder. Okay, so in the early 1930s, the guitar began to replace the banjo in general popularity. And in around 1933, so 3 years later, they started making Gretsch brand guitars. So archtops and flat tops as well. Acoustic guitars originally, before then moving on to electric guitars and archtops in the late 1930s. Almost said 1990s. These are much older guitars. These are, much later guitars, shall I say. This is from 1955, and this one over here is also from 1955. So these are not going to be, this one is from 1950 specifically, 54, sorry. So these ones are, from much later, after they decided to start making guitars in 1939. These guys over here are a little bit more interesting, but also from that same 1954, 1955 era as well, which is quite interesting. Like a lot of the same hallmarks are here that you would, identify a Gretsch guitar with. These interesting kind of like bumpy inlays here that you have along here. This hanging pickguard or floating pickguard, and these interesting pickups here. These I presume, no, they're single coils. I don't imagine they're humbuckers. And this neat little tuning bridge for the intonation going on here. It's pretty cool. It's a pretty cool design. And again, very similar to stuff that you still see in Gretsch guitars to this day. There isn't a ton of modernization, I suppose. So between the 1940s, 1930s even, and 1948, the company had a number of changes of personnel in terms of the president of the company to lead and to guide the company. So the original Fred Gretsch, who had founded the company way back, he was president, but he was only nominally president. He wasn't really guiding things behind the scenes. And Fred was then replaced by his third son, William, who was then replaced by his other son, Fred, after William had passed away prematurely. And this has described Fred Jr.'s leadership as the glory days of Gretsch guitars during the 1950s and 60s. With that said, it's kind of interesting that like this is the 30s and 40s. Like that's when World War II was happening, right? 1939 to 1945. World War II was going on at that point. So there wasn't an awful lot of material around, I imagine, for the production of new guitars. So it was a very, very challenging time, very challenging in 1942 in particular, for someone to take over the lead of that company, considering that the war was literally at the midpoint at that stage. After World War II was over, Gretsch placed a new emphasis on supplying guitars for professional musicians, and the first new Gretsch electric guitar in the post-war era revived the Electromatic Spanish model name, this arch top debuting in 1949 alongside a number of synchromatic acoustic guitars. A few years later, their Diamond pickup would receive its official Gretsch name, the Dynasonics. So these pickups here, they are Gretsch Dynasonics. It's interesting, I suppose, that all of these guitars that are pictured here are from 1954, 1955. From those glory days, as it has described them here, post-World War II, specifically because that's what they were trying to do. They were trying to produce guitars that were of professional quality. Before that time, who knows what they were doing, right? But these guitars have become iconic and they've become synonymous with the Gretsch name, specifically because that's the market that they were targeting at the time. During 1950, Gretsch certainly noticed the new solid body electric guitar that Fender had begun making, choosing to call it the Broadcaster. This was a model name that Gretsch still used, although spelled with a K rather than a C, for a number of its drum products. So that's why when we were looking at Fender, Gretsch asked them to drop that, that they changed it from the Broadcaster to the Telecaster. Again, they felt like it was a much more modern name with the advent of television. It was one of those things that really kind of spoke to the zeitgeist of the time. Same with the Stratocaster, a few years later, Stratosphere, Space, the space race, etc. Very, very important words around that time. So Gretsch, asked Fender to drop it, which they did. And then when, Gretsch saw that these guitars were becoming popular, Gretsch, responded, and they started to create and produce solid body guitars, or at least semi-solid bodies as well. Onto the next page, we get this lovely spread here. We get these fresh-faced boys from Liverpool. We've got, John, George, Paul, and Ringo listed here. And here we have George with his Gretsch Duo Jet in 1961. But this is a 57 Duo Jet here with a lovely tremolo. John got his Rickenbacker, Paul has his Hofner, and then Ringo has a drum kit. It says here, Harrison used the Duo Jet throughout the group's rise to fame, only retiring it when he acquired a double cutaway Gretsch Country Gentleman in summer 1963. And that's something that we'll see at some point, I imagine. These are also Gretsch Jet models. This is the Gretsch Duo Jet, similar to the one that George Harrison had, although without the tremolo system in place here. This is the Jet Firebird, made in 1960, and a silver Duo Jet that dates from 1955. I always found that the knob placement and the switches and the number of switches to be quite interesting when it comes to Gretsch's. I think the number of switches was to do with the outputs, but don't quote me on that. Maybe we'll see a little bit more about that in the future. But I think it's because of the outputs that you could have a mono or stereo output when it came to these Gretsch guitars, which was quite innovative at the time. Still is, I suppose. As we turn the page, we see a couple of interesting models here. Again, signature models. So I suppose that after Gibson saw the success of the Gibson Les Paul, they noticed that, hey, maybe having an artist having a signature model, or at least with their name assigned to a particular model, it might bump the sales a little bit. So as a result, these are the Chet Atkins Gretsch guitar models, the Chet Atkins hollow body. So it's got the G engraved on here. It's got this Bigsby trem. It's got the couple of knobs here, the switch and the floating pickguard. This is a more solid body model. This is the hollow body, or at least semi-hollow, I imagine. And this is a full-on hollow body model. Well, apparently this is the early production sample that was sent specifically to Chet by Gretsch, noting that the control layout and the bridge are not the standard. I suppose looking at it here, this one is a much more, shiny version compared to this duller kind of version. I suppose they released whatever they could at the time to get it out there, just for him to see and to try out. Also, I suppose this piece here is certainly different. It's got this lightning bolt in the production model rather than the sample model, which had the bridge type that Gretsch had been releasing up to that point. So we're still in the 50s. This is still 1955. Moving along, we get to the iconic white guitars of Gretsch. Over here we have the luxurious Gretsch White Falcon. I first came across a White Falcon when I lived in France for a period. Myself and a friend of mine were walking past a guitar store, and they had a couple of White Falcons in the window. And I had never seen them in person before. I'd only seen them in magazines. And I very excitedly, pointed them out to one of my friends. And we came up with this idea of getting White Falcons each and forming a super group called the Twin Falcons. It was wonderful. It was a wonderful time of my life. But I've always kind of yearned for a White Falcon ever since that. But yes, this is the luxurious White Falcon. It comes in two types. It has a stereo and mono version. The stereo one comes with the extra knobs to indicate as to which output it's going through. And this up here is Billy Duffy of the Cult playing his Gretsch White Falcon without a pickguard and with a strange tremolo lever on it. Then they decided to take everything that made the White Falcon incredible and luxurious, and they removed the hollow part. And they just made a solid body version. And the solid body version was called the Penguin. The Penguin was not popular. And as a result of that, it has become one of the more rare Gretsch guitars that you're going to find, particularly around 1956, 1958 or so. It is very rare as a result, because it was not popular. And that's kind of the way things go, I suppose, when it comes to not just guitars, but with anything. That if something is not particularly popular, it actually becomes much more sought after in the future because of its limited run. But the Penguin, still very, very cool design, pretty iconic. Fun thing about the Gretsch White Falcon is that Bono actually has a signature model of the White Falcon, except it is green and it is called the Irish Falcon. Anyway, on to the next page. Here's my man. Here's Brian Setzer. He's playing his White Falcon in this picture. I believe he had a signature model. Yeah, we can see it here. Brian Setzer has long been a Gretsch lover. He's pictured above with some of his collection. He has a signature guitar, the signature 1955 White Falcon with extra glitz on the headstock over here. And I think it was released as a particular signature model in production in the future after he kind of started playing them. Then down here we get a couple more models. We've got the Chet Atkins model over here. We've got a single pickup anniversary model from 1959 and a double anniversary model here as well. Again, trying to kind of, I suppose, cash in on the I suppose, nostalgia of the original Gretsch guitars that were released back in 1955 or back in 1930, 1940. Yeah, they've been producing guitars so long, almost 100 years. Amazing. Then we get on to a couple more Falcon models. Right, so this one over here is a White Falcon stereo, and this is a country club stereo. Again, the stereo and mono options were super interesting. So you could either output your guitar to multiple amplifiers or just one amplifier if you wish to. It would effectively split your signal to go to multiple outputs. Very, very cool, very, very interesting. Then over here we've got a couple of cutaway or double cutaway models here. So we've got the Country Gent, the Country Gentleman, released in 1963. Again, as we spoke about earlier, George Harrison started to pick that up and started to play it. And then over here we have the Chet Atkins hollow body, again with that double cutaway, just to give that additional fret access, and more comfortable, I suppose, fret access. Next up, we get a little bit more modern here. So these are three Gretsch Corvette style guitars pictured here. And I think that it's quite interesting that it took this long for Gretsch to kind of really try and make a name for itself in the solid body field, right? Like we had a couple of them in the past, right? We had the Penguin, right? We had, the Chet Atkins solid body model, but those were not the main business of Gretsch, right? Gretsch were about the hollow bodies, and they were about, I suppose, rockabilly and a specific genre and a specific type of music. And then they get into the Corvettes. These are pretty neat. I like these a lot. What is also interesting, though, is that these also still have a lot of the same trademarks of Gretsch, right? They have this bridge here, right? This similar bridge to one another. They have the tremolo system. That's kind of like an old school tremolo system. It's modern in the wrong ways, I think, right? That they've kind of changed up the body type, or the body model and what it looks like. They attach the neck directly onto the body by the looks of things here. Very, very little room where the fretboard meets the body here by the looks of things. And yeah, it's modern in the wrong ways. They've changed the headstock here. So if they're using the same hardware, they're using the same pickups, that kind of thing, I don't see this be appealing to an awful lot of people. But again, maybe that wasn't particularly popular, and maybe as a result of that, these have become highly sought after. These came from 1961, 62, and 66. I think that this idea to bring the fretboard directly onto the body, or closer within the body itself, was probably a better idea. Over here we have a couple of other Gretsch models. We have the Jet Firebird. The Jet Firebird is actually a guitar that you still see knocking around to this day. That is a guitar that is popular with ZZ Top, I believe. One of the guitarists in ZZ Top plays a Jet Firebird. And I think, I might be mistaken on this, but I think Malcolm Young played a Gretsch guitar. I think it was a Jet Firebird, but I could be wrong on that. More interestingly and more importantly, over here we get the peculiar, as it's described here, Astrojet from 1966. It made few friends for Gretsch, funnily enough. Other models in the line had gained a double cutaway shape, including the Silverjet, a double cutaway Jet Firebird, yeah, as we see here. But I want to know more about this. I want to know how this came about, because this is pretty wild looking, and again, a bit more modern, and slightly more modern in the right ways, I think. 1966, it was getting close to the 70s. You know, as we've seen before, there hasn't been a ton of innovation, and this could have been, you know, the poster boy for innovation within those kinds of guitar circles. What's interesting here is that with CBS purchasing Fender in 1965, Baldwin purchased Burns Guitar Company of England. Burns Guitar Company is super interesting. Maybe we'll look at that briefly in another video. But Gretsch was purchased by Baldwin as well in 1967. And Baldwin, you know, they weren't that interested in music, right? So they were diversifying its portfolio from, you know, these brands over into, you know, financial services, into banking. So Gretsch was kind of left to its own devices, from what I understand here. Here we have a number of other models here. We have, you know, this one here is referred to as the Viking, as you can see on the pickguard. Over here we have a Monkey's signature model, which is kind of cool. Over here we have a 7-string guitar, which is quite interesting. And you wouldn't see too many in the way of 7 strings prior to 1999 or so. You know, again, talking about, you know, nu metal and the advent of nu metal and the like at that point. So yeah, it's interesting that there's a 7-string from 1977 here as well. Appropriate here. Then over here we have a Chet Atkins Super Axe, the last Atkins signature model to appear from Gretsch. Then we have this White Falcon here, and this one is also a stereo Falcon over here as well, with the double cutaway, obviously. Then over here we get a couple of other models, interesting models as well, modern in the right ways by the looks of things here as well. So we've got this one over here from the Gretsch Baldwin operation. This is a Country Rock by the looks of things. This one here in the middle is a committee guitar made during 1978, and this is a Beast BST 1000 from 1979. So on the cusp of the 80s, a guitar called the Beast would probably be a good idea. This one in the middle with the racing stripes seems pretty neat as well. And you notice here that the bridges are completely different to anything that we've seen from Gretsch up to this point. Good call at that point in time, reading the writing that was on the wall, I suppose. Then over here, we've got more Brian Setzer signature models here. Yeah, this one over here is the Brian Setzer model. And then this one over here is a Blue Sparkle Jet. That was basically a drum finish, apparently, that has been applied to a guitar. And then there were more signature models that were for Keith Scott and Dwayne Eddy And yeah, Keith Scott is Bryan Adams' guitarist for his live shows as well. So this was in 1995, and this one was also in 1995, and these ads are from 1999 and 1998. So yeah, absolutely. Gretsch has had a long and rich history, again, almost 100 years or so. So it's super cool that they are still knocking around and that they are still played and are, you know, relatively popular. Maybe these kinds of models have been forgotten, but these models that, you know, Gretsch are known for and super popular for, these have really, really stood the test of time. And for me, for the book, that is it when it comes to Gretsch guitars. It's super interesting, again, that they have had such a long and rich history. They've gone through trials and tribulations. They've gone through, you know, they've seen the economic slump of the First World War and then founded the company. Then into the Second World War, the company survived, started identifying professional artists and marketing guitars for them, that this is a professional instrument for professional artists. It's really been the brand. And then over time, you know, they've diversified somewhat, right? That they've tried things. They've done these Corvettes. You know, they've done the Duojet. They tried the Astrojet, which I still think is a bit funky looking. You know, they've, you know, released a variety of different models. The epic and luxurious White Falcon. They have, you know, these ones here, the Beast and the Committee, which is a strange name for a guitar, I'll admit, but double humbuckers. Interesting bridge. No tremolo system, or no vibrato. Brian Setzer, you know, leading the way and really kind of pushing the brand. You know, unbelievable signature artist, a pioneer for them, or promoter for them. And yeah, they're still going strong to this day. And that is it for Gretsch guitars. If you like this video, please go ahead and hit the like button. Subscribe to the channel to see more of this kind of stuff in the future. And of course, leave me comments in the comments section below if you want to see any more of these visual histories here. They're super cool, they're super interesting, and I'll be happy to do them for you. But thank you all so much for stopping by and for hanging out with me, and I will see you in the next video. Bye bye.